Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Alien Chaos here, and in this video I'm gonna talk about FM synthesis for Hitech, Psytrance and Darkpsy tracks. So in this video I'm gonna show you many different ways to approach those sounds. Each one of them have their own properties and their own sounding. So after this video you will learn many ways to achieve those sounds and bring more variation to your tracks. So let's go. Okay, here on Ableton, the first one I'm going to show you is the LFO Pitch Modulation. So I'm gonna open an operator device. Okay, here on operator I'm gonna also drop a spectrum analyzer and also a tuner, because some of these leads are not properly tuned to the track. It's much more noisy leads, so you can know the difference and choose which one is the best for your tracks. So this first one is not totally tuned because we are using an LFO to modulate the pitch of the oscillator. This is a kind of primitive way to do that, because it's not like some FM synthesis, FM synths works, but it works very nicely and you can use it to achieve much more psychedelic bubbles and tunings. Okay, so here in operator I have one sine wave, static sine wave. As you can see here, I'm pressing the C note. Now I'm going to use an LFO that is automatically routed to the pitch of the oscillator. So as you can see, the waveform is not static anymore. It's going up or down in frequency. Using this LFO, the frequency range from the LFO. So that's why it's called LFO, low frequency oscillator, because the LFO is an oscillator but generates low frequencies, lower frequencies that you cannot hear, because the human ear start to listen around 20 hertz above. So in low frequency oscillator we can have a very low frequencies like this. This kind of wave is so low that we cannot hear. We just hear above 20 hertz. So that's why we use LFO to modulate some parameters. But an LFO also can start to cycle in an audible rate. So as I'm increasing, I'm going to increase the rate to the maximum. And now you'll see I have a lot of harmonics. If I turn off, it's just one harmonic we see here. And now I have much more richer sound. Just notice how the harmonics are generating. They go for both sides, upper harmonic and lower harmonic. But it's totally atonal sounds. As you can see here on tuner, it's not every time hitting here, and also the tone here comes from the height here. I can also set this, because this is set to low frequency oscillator, I can go to high. But it's very hard to tune. I recommend you don't care so much about the tuning when you're using this technique, but don't worry, you can just make it sound good as you want, and then you can use in your track, no problem. It's more a kind of noisy lead, but fits in very well in many styles of Psytrance tracks. So when you are doing this technique, you can play with height, amount, and also the shape of the LFO and the oscillator here. Here I have the sine wave modulating the sine wave. Let's try here the square wave. The square wave has much more digital sounding than the sine. The sine is much more bubble. Also triangle is different. Also saw up, it's very bubble. Saw down, sharp. Also here I have sample and hold, but doesn't sound as an FM lead. Also noise, it's not so pleasant, so stay with these ones here. I like the saw up. And you can also play with the waveform in the oscillator. So let's try to saw wave. You can also use square wave. Let's try square wave with square wave. I'm gonna drop an arpeggiator here just to trig in the right time. Also, I love to use a filter to shape the sounds, giving more movement. We can also use user waveform. This time is very, very bubble. The second example is actually the phase modulation. This is more classic. It's very interesting because many people say frequency modulation, but what they mostly using is actually phase modulation. It's totally different. We are not using an LFO to modulate the pitch. We are actually using another oscillator to modulate our hearable oscillator. So in FM synthesis world, we have the carrier, that's the wave we actually hear. This one is the A, and B is the modulator. is the waveform that's going to modulate it. So we're not gonna hear the FM, this oscillator, we just hear the modulation itself. But it's not frequency modulation, it's phase modulation, and the sounding and the way it adds harmonic is totally different. And also for this one, you can use harmonically in your track. So if you are using some melody, the leads can follow the melody very easy. So to do that, here I have a sine wave again. And now I just gonna increase the level of oscillator B. As you can see, it's just adding upper harmonic. The root harmonic stays the same. And also the tune never goes away. You can also try different octaves. And for this style of synthesis, I like to use an user waveform here on oscillator B. With this technique, you can also add more oscillators also. Till we reach this very noisy FM. So this is the phase modulation. Another technique I'm going to show here, it's not frequency modulation, but we are going to use distortion to add harmonics to the sound. For this one, I'm going to use Wavefolder distortion. Let's check. For this one, I'm going to use the wavetable synth, also the saturator. Let's add the spectrum and tuner. Okay. And now I have the sine wave again. Now I'm going to use here sinoid fold. When we are making wavefolder distortion, when the signal hits the maximum level, the 0 dB, the waves start to fold back, and this sound sounds like an FM synthesis. So let's check. I'm going to drop down the output here and take up the drive. You see here the harmonics very close to the FM, to the phase modulation actually. Also in soft clip you can add even more harmonics. And to achieve different soundings, I like to use wavetable because you can use wavetables to generate the sounds. Just on this style of synthesis, don't use the filter before the distortion, because if not, we are going to distort the filter. As you can listen, is not so pleasant, so let's add a filter later here. Another technique, it's on Serum VST. We are going to use the remap function to generate more harmonics to the wavetable. So here I'm gonna use a digital waveform. Let's try this one. I like it. And here on warp mode, we are going to use the remap. So remap, it's going to distort the waveform in the shape we are using here. When we open this tab, we can actually draw some points the same as the LFO. It's actually route to the LFO because here we have the presets, and also here is the same presets. So you can save your favorite shapes to do this. So let's make some random shape here. And now I'm going to increase the remap. Oops, sorry. So it's adding much more variation on the waveform and adding more harmonics. This technique is very nice because you can actually shape in real time here. And also you have remap 1, remap 2, it will double the shape here. So yeah, many combinations. You can also change the waveform here. And that's very different soundings. Let's go to the filter here. Select a high pass filter, some resonance, some drive. Also, with this technique, you can use wavetables shapes here on LFO. So, for example, I go here on oscillator B, and I'm going to use the digital SSQ waveform. And now on LFO 1, I'm going to open up the preset and go here, wavetable B to LFO. Now, the LFO have the same shape as the waveform here. Note, this is just for the last updates from Serum. So take a look if you have the last update to do that. Now I'm going to take down this oscillator B, and then I'm going to save this shape here on my user library. You can use SSQ1 because I already saved sometimes here. On remap, I go to preset, user, and now I have SSQ1 that I save now. And now I have the same shape from SSQ here on Remap. I love this technique because the remap doesn't make that noise top end when we are using the phase modulation. So you can have very rich sound without that very nasty parts like. Nice, nice. Now let's go to the last one here. This one is sample based, so I use it to call it audio rate sampling because we are going to repeat the sample in an audio rate frequency. So with this technique we can have many very rich sounding lead. So to do that, I'm going to use snare, but you can use any sample you want. But I like to use some. I like that it has some attack going on because it gives a nice texture. But you can use with any sample. Okay. So two ways to do that. The first one is loads on simpler. Here on classic mode, we are going to loop and then shorten the length. Oops. When I have the loop mode, the sample, when it comes to the end, starts from the beginning, making this loop effect. And as I'm shortening the length, I have an audio rate modulation here. Let's say this one. Let's go to the tuner. Also, I forgot to mention, but this Serum, it's totally tuned, so you can also use melodics with this technique here. This one is not so easy, but you can actually tune the lead. For example, here I have on G, but it's, as you can see, it's red here. It's not close to the actually tune. So I'm going to use the detune to make it green. But now it's G and I'm pressing the C note. So now I go to the transposition and reach the C frequency. So now it's following each note I'm playing on the keyboard. Now let's use the filter. Nice. Another way to do that, I'm gonna take down the loop here. And now I'm going to use another arpeggiator. Okay. But this time I'm going to use a free mode. So when I have on free mode, I can go to an audio rate range. For example, 10 milliseconds. It's great. Increase the gate to more fuller sound. Also, you can use some steps here, generate more texture. But as you can see, here it's very different to tune this lead. But don't, I suggest you to don't care about it. Just make it sound as good as you want, and you can use it. Actually, doesn't matter. It's much more like a noisy lead, so you can use in your tracks, no problem. So I hope you learned something new in this tutorial. If you like, give a like to this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you're not, and let's make some music. See you in the next video.